Hi, welcome. Jon Bushey here. This is another video about our 7-ton truck from the United States Marine Corps. Hopefully you have one of these trucks and that's why you're watching this video. I've made quite a few other videos, so some things I'm just going to skip through. This video is about replacing the axle seals or the hub seals on a 7-ton truck, and I'm talking about the rear seals. The front seals, there's a video by my friend Mica out in California. He did a video about replacing the front seals, and it's a little bit different than replacing the rear seals. All 4 rear seals are the same. I'll be showing you what we do today. This isn't advice for you, and this isn't the proper way to do it in your situation. I'm just showing you how we do it. If you decide to take some of this advice or some of the things I'm showing you, then that's fine, but I don't want any legal responsibility for showing you how we do it. This might also be the way the Marines do it, but as you know, if you own a 7-ton, the Marines won't tell us really anything about this truck, how to do anything, how to repair it, nothing. So this is the way that I came up with, and I think it works pretty well. We've already done 2, and we did 1 the hard way, and then we figured out the easy way to do it. So I'm going to be showing you the easy way to do it. The first thing, and to clarify, the seals aren't here. There really aren't any seals in the front here. The seal I'm talking about is the one back behind on the axle. Very large seal. They're easy to get. I'll put the part number in the description. You can get them at a lot of different places. We got ours at Fleet Pride, but it's a widely available part, unlike most of the parts for this truck. Yeah, the first step, jack up the truck, take the tire off. We've already started doing that. We've disconnected the CTIS, we've taken off the plastic cover, we've jacked it up. After we get the tire off, then we're going to cage the brakes, which just makes it easier to get the brake drum off. I think that's it. Give us a few minutes to get the tire off, then I'll see you again. Okay, we removed the tire. Oh, by the way, I forgot. We're in Utah and today it's 32 degrees outside. We're running the furnace in here. I've got a heated shop, and so if you hear a little bit of noise in the background, that's the furnace running to try and keep it a tolerable temperature in here. So yeah, we removed the wheel and now we're looking at the brake drum. This truck, the 7-ton trucks, all have drum brakes, even the front. And so the next thing to do is remove the brake drum. And the seal we're trying to get to is back in here. You can't really see it in there. We have to remove more stuff in order to see it well. But that's where the seal is. And when the seal starts leaking, then oil starts getting all over the place. These axles are oil bath axles. They're not grease axles. There's 2 types of axles, grease and oil bath, and these are oil bath. And so you have to fill the oil and everything on it once in a while and change the oil. But there's a seal back here that keeps that oil from migrating out of the axle, and then it gets all over the brakes and all over everything. This actually isn't too bad. It looks pretty clean, but the seal is leaking, so we're going to replace it anyway. Oh, another thing, by the way, these boots. As long as you've got the tire out of the way and everything, it's a good time to check these boots and make sure everything's okay. This boot doesn't have any breaks in it or anything, no cracks, and it seems to be in good shape, but there's grease leaking all over the place, so that's kind of weird. We're also going to check this, and I made a video about replacing these boots, so you can check that if you want to. One more thing on the front up here. Okay, the other thing I should mention that we do is, at this point, before or after we take off the brake drum, we would start draining the oil. Unfortunately, you can see this is in exactly the wrong position. We'd hope that this could be turned around so that one of these drain plugs is down at the bottom, and then we would start draining the oil now so we don't have a big mess later. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. We've caged the brakes, so maybe we'll be able to turn this. Sometimes the axle doesn't want to cooperate with us and we're not able to turn it, but we might try to turn it, get one of these at the bottom, and then we're going to drain all the hub oil out of it just to make it cleaner later on. So give us a minute and we'll take off this drum. Wow, now it sounds like the furnace is really loud, so I hope you can still hear me. By the way, this is my wife April. She's here today to help move some of the heavy stuff. I've already loosened the brake drum and it's not really stuck on there. Some of them get really stuck on there, but this one's loose. So April's going to help me drop it onto this dolly. Oh, by the way, I have a list of tools and helpful things like a dolly in the description. So if you are going to try and do this, you can see the tools that I use, not necessarily the tools that you use, to do all of this, just so you have kind of an idea of how many tools are needed. There are a couple of special tools needed. You know, the thing about the 7-ton is that they tried to make it so that you could use regular tools to repair it, because they might be out in the war zone or something and not have access to first echelon or something. And so they tried to make it so you didn't have any special tools to repair the truck. But unfortunately, that's not true in this case. So I'll show you those special tools later. Right now, let's take off this drum. Oh, and it doesn't really need two people. I'm getting to be old, I'm out of shape. I think one person that was in shape could do it by themselves, but I asked my wife to help me out today. All right, we got that off, and it's not very heavy. My wife helped me, and I sure appreciate her help. She's a trooper. She's helped with a lot of things on the 7-ton. So yeah, I think one person could probably do it and have a dolly ready, because it is a little bit heavy. You don't want it to drop on their cement floor or something like that. We've done 2 of these already, and usually it's dirtier, but you don't see rust. So this one's a little bit unusual in that it's a little bit clean, but at the same time it's rusty, and this is all grease. So it's really oily and everything in here, and we'll clean all this up. It's easy. We'll use some degreaser, and we'll use some carb cleaner, and they clean up really good. But this worries me a little bit that some moisture got in here and maybe caused some problems. But yeah, we've always cleaned these up. They've turned out really good. You can see that there isn't much wear here. So I think the drum is good. We'll reuse that. Then up on the brake shoes themselves, yeah, you can see there's some oil on there and some oil's accumulated in here. We've had good luck just cleaning these up too. So we'll probably just get some cleaner and a big bucket down below and hose this all off and get it all cleaned up and reuse these brakes. I made another video about replacing the brakes, and usually what we do is we clean up one axle and then we put new brakes on the other axle. So we'll just clean these up and clean up the drum, and I think we'll be fine. The next step is to take off the hub, and unfortunately we weren't able to rotate it, so it's going to be a big mess. But this is the hub assembly here, and it splits right on this line here. There is one O-ring in there that holds it on. So we'll be able to split it here and take this part off. This weighs a little bit too, but maybe 30 pounds, 40 pounds, not bad. So we'll start the process of taking off this hub. Okay, now we're going to take off the hub. They've made it fairly easy for us. What I need to do is there's two screws, large headed screws, and they're about 180 degrees apart.
those are screwed into the plate behind. So I will never get off this hub unless I remove these 2 screws. Now, when you remove the 2 screws, you need to move them and put them in these other holes. Hole down there again, about 180 degrees apart. And what that's going to do, it's a threaded hole also. When you thread these screws into these holes, it starts pushing on the plate behind. And so then the hub's just going to fall off. Now, I only started a couple threads on this, and that's because I don't want this one to start pushing on the hub when I've still got this one screwed in to the back plate. And so I'm going to take out both these, I'm going to put them down here, and now, because they're both in the new hole, I can start tightening both of these, and it'll pull the hub off where we can get it and set it on the ground.
I forgot to mention a couple things. Number one is my friend Mica, who made a bunch of videos. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Mica had a lot of trouble getting those screws out, and I'm not sure why. He said that he thought that there was Loctite on there. I don't really see any evidence of the Loctite on the ones I've done, and I don't think it's really necessary because the wheel, the rim, goes right up against this surface, and so there's no way that those screws would ever get loose. Now, who knows? I mean, the Marines, as I've been working on this truck, you know, sometimes I wonder about the Marine mechanics. 3521, I think. Yeah, so there may be a lot of variation on these trucks. And the other thing I forgot to mention is have a bucket ready, because as you're taking off this hub, there should be fluid in there. There should be about 1.5 quarts of fluid in there. So as you're taking off this hub, you're going to have a lot of fluid drain out the bottom. Okay, it's not coming out yet, but it should at any second. I'm just using a screwdriver to help get it off here. There isn't a gasket or anything, there is an O-ring, but the O-ring is kind of out of the way, so it's not going to get hurt if I pry this off a little bit. There's the fluid. I had recently changed the fluid, that's why it's so nice and clean. So, it's just about lunchtime here in Utah, and I'm a little bit hungry and I'm a little bit cold. I turned off the heater. Plus I need to wait. I don't want to make a huge mess, so I think what I'll do is I will go to lunch, come back in an hour or so, hopefully all the fluid's drained out of there by then, and we can continue working. Okay, I'm back from lunch, and I realized when I was eating lunch there were a few things I forgot to mention. So I'll do that now, just to catch up on that stuff. One thing is, once you take this apart and the gear oil comes out, you can really smell lithium. So, you know, it stinks up our whole shop and everything. We don't really like that smell. So if you are thinking about doing this project, what I'd recommend is as soon as all this gear oil's out and everything, clean up as much as you can, throw the rags someplace else, and get the gear oil itself into a container that you can seal so you're not smelling it all the time. I also wanted to mention this project takes me and my wife, I roped my wife into helping me, it takes us 4 to 5 hours. A little bit longer because sometimes we replace boots and stuff like that, but you know, on a good day we can do it in 4 to 5 hours. The Marines say they can do it in 3 hours. Of course, they have a lot more experience than we do. I normally wear gloves when I'm working. I know about all the biohazards and cancer-causing agents and all that kind of stuff. When making the videos, I like to not use gloves because then I think it's easier to point to things, it's easier for me to hold things like that. But yes, normally I would wear gloves. I do have a parts diagram that shows all the parts and I'll make this available. YouTube, I don't think they give you a very good way to distribute things, you know, a part of your video. But look in the description, I'll figure something out, and I'll leave a link there to this so you can print off a nice clean one. This one's a little bit dirty. And it shows all the parts we're dealing with. So you can get one of these in the description. Speaking of parts, I sell parts. I have all these parts. I have all the parts that we're dealing with today. I bought some Oshkosh parts to rebuild this entire hub. And so I have all these parts shown. I have extra hubs, I have extra brake, I have extra brake drums, I have shock absorbers. I have a lot of stuff I sell on eBay. A lot of it actually isn't listed on eBay. I'll insert here my account on eBay, so if you need some parts, you can look on eBay. I'll also put my email in the description in case you have some parts that you want, but they're not listed on eBay. I might have them. I have a lot of parts I don't put on eBay. I use dollies to move these parts around. We've got 2 big ones already. We've got at least 1 or 2 more big parts coming off. So I use dollies just so I can move them around when I need to clean them and stuff. So the dollies have been very helpful. The one more thing that I want to mention that I do, and it saved me a lot of time and a lot of headache, is I take the screws out. Now, one time I was rebuilding one of these and I put the screws in the original, or in the takeoff position so that I could get the hub off. And then I laid the hub down. Then later, after cleaning everything and doing everything, I went to put the hub back on and it wouldn't go on. And I'm like, what the heck? Why isn't it going on? I finally remembered, oh crap, those 2 screws. So I moved the screws from the takeoff position to the original position. I'll show you what I mean.
So this is the screw, 2 of them, 2 screws I'm talking about, this one. So this is the takeoff position, and don't leave them in there when you're trying to put it back on. So I move them back to the original position, and that way I won't forget them. Also, we took this off, and now you can see inside. Now something happened this time that's never happened to me before. This thing's sitting here. It's a small, very small roller bearing, and it shouldn't be in there. That's the wrong place. It needs to be in here, down at the bottom. And every other time I've taken these apart, that's where it was. It was down in there where it's supposed to be. So I just took that off. So the next step, once we've got the hub off, and we can move this out of the way now, then we need to take off this bolt. Oh, and if you're curious about all this stuff and how it all works and everything like that, again, Mica has a great video. I'll leave a link to his channel or maybe to the video in there in the description so that you can see what Mica's talking about and how all these gears work. This bolt comes out really easy because this is all wet in here. This, like I mentioned, is the oil bath type of hub, and so you shouldn't really find any rust in here. You shouldn't find, you know, bolts that are hard to loosen because they've rusted or something. No, this is all wet inside here with oil, and so everything should be in good shape. By the way, that's one of the reasons I like to take all these apart. Even if the seals weren't leaking, which they definitely are in this case, I like to take these apart just to see what's going on in here, to see what condition they're in, to see if there's some parts that need replacing. Mica, when he took his apart, he found that one part of the hub was broken, and he had to fix that. So, you know, I like taking it apart just to make sure that everything's okay in here. So here's the big bolt. I used a 3/8 inch Allen to take that off. I'll leave all the tools in the description. And then once you've got that bolt out, it's easy to remove this gear. Okay, normally it's easy to remove the gear, of course, because we're making a video, then it's going to be hard. There it is. Not much to that, just a heavy, massive gear. And now we've exposed a lot more in there. I like to clean up the oil at this point that was in there before. Oh, look, you can see someone was banging on this part. I don't know why. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of clean this up and everything, and then we'll come back and talk about the next step. Okay, the other thing I should have mentioned is that, you know, I'm wiping up the oil and everything. And you can probably see that in here, there's little pieces of metal. You can see them reflecting and stuff like that. And my rag actually got pretty dirty. Oh, here you can see a lot of like a copper color pieces of metal. I'm not worried about that at all. They've all had it. The truck works fine. So I'm not worried about all these pieces of metal. Boy, there's some more copper right there. It doesn't seem to matter. I've had 3 of these trucks and they've all had this kind of stuff in the hub, so I don't think it really matters. So don't get worried if you happen to be taking apart your truck, and again, you can do that at your own risk, and you see a lot of this stuff in there, don't get freaked out. They all have that stuff. Okay, what we do next is there's a retaining ring there. And so we're going to take that. I'm just using a regular little screwdriver. And there's the end of the retaining ring has a little cut in it that allows you to get a screwdriver in there. Then after that, you can just bring it around and take off the ring. So there's the ring that just holds the rest of this gear assembly and stuff in place. And then this whole hub will come off. Or sorry, planetary gear will come off. Okay. These just slide off. It's a little bit heavy, but you just set that sucker down. And now we've got to the important parts. There's a retainer here and something behind that, just a blank like washer. And then you can see that behind there, that's the bearing. Again, some junk around here. I'm not worried about it. They all seem to have that. So let me take a break for a second and I'll be right back. All right, so what we're going to do next is this ring right here needs to come off. And it screws on there, and there's actually a bolt in there. I'll insert a video to show you what it looks like in there. And normally you have to take a 5/16 Allen wrench and put it in there and loosen that bolt so that this thing can be turned off. Every one I've worked on though, these are always loose, and I finally figured out why. Seems like they should be tight to hold that on there, but actually they're always loose because in order to put it back together, this whole ring, locking ring, perhaps you could call it, needs to be loose. And I'll show you that, you know, when we put it back together. I made a special tool to take this ring off. You can see the Marines have been just wailing on this poor thing. So you put something in here, maybe a chisel, because I can see some marks in there. And then you'd hit it with a hammer and get it to move. I didn't really like that. I can see that this is all busted up and everything. And also putting it back together, you can't really do that. So I made a tool, and the way it fits in here is like this. And then you can just turn the tool and the big ring comes off. I'm not a good welder. Mica is a lot better welder than I am, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that I was able to make a tool to take this off, which isn't that important. But to put it back on, you really need something. I was talking to a Marine and he said, oh yeah, changing those hubs aren't so bad, taking them apart, but he says, what a nightmare putting it back together. And I didn't know what he meant. I thought, well,
Can't be that hard to put back together. It wasn't that hard to take apart. But now that I've put some back together, I can tell you they're a nightmare to put back together. And I'll show you why that is. So we're just going to take off this ring, and then eventually it'll come off. By the way, there's a little stud there, a little pin. That's important. We're putting it back together. Okay, so we got that piece off. That holds everything else in there. So now we've got this big washer. And here comes the bearing. I'd rather get this off separately. I guess that's not going to happen. There. So here's a plate. Doesn't really do anything. It's kind of dirty. We'll clean that up. And the bearing's going to come out. We don't need to take the bearing out, but I think it's safer if we take the bearing out now, so we don't drop it on the ground or something later, because it's loose, obviously. If you're trying to get off this hub, then it's possible that this could fall out and land on the floor. Wow, that's really dirty there. Huh. You know, some of these trucks haven't been driven for a while, and so a lot of junk collects at the bottom. Okay, there's the bearing. The next thing is, oh, and you can see the CTIS hubs in there. Next thing is we take off this hub, and that can be a little bit difficult to do. And this is one of the differences between the front and the back. The axles. Again, I'd really encourage you to watch Mica's video, even if you're not going to be doing the front. He talks about a lot more stuff than I do. So yeah, the next step, let's take this off. All right, so now we're ready to take off the hub part. And what my wife and I did is we went behind here and just hit it with hammers in synchronization. So we synchronized when we were hitting it behind, and then it came off pretty easy. One of them was really, really hard, but this one wasn't hard at all. And so now that we've loosened it, I should be able to just lift it off there and set it on my dolly. Yeah. Okay. And then here's everything else. Oh shoot, this one's installed backwards too. Look at that, honey. Crap. Huh. Another thing that I don't understand is, I guess when the Marines rebuild these, they sometimes put grease on the bearings. And I don't do that. And I recommend you don't do that. Because there's still grease in here. And of course the grease is thick. And so it doesn't allow a lot of the gear oil to get back here, which it's supposed to. And so we're going to take all this grease off here. The grease mixes with the gear oil, and then it changes the viscosity. And of course you don't want that to happen, especially if the truck's being operated in a cold environment. You don't want grease in there. And so I recommend not using grease on any of these parts. Just put it back together, fill it with the gear oil like you're supposed to, and then you're good. What I was talking about is this sensor right here. This sensor is the axle speed. It's the speed sensor that tells you how fast this particular wheel is going. These trucks have all-wheel drive, and they also have traction control. And so the way the traction control works, each wheel has to have a speed sensor so that they know how fast that wheel is spinning. If that wheel is spinning too fast in comparison to the other wheels, then they put on the brakes to slow this axle down so that the others will get more traction. Okay, what I was mentioning, I said, oh honey, look,
So on one of the other hub ends on a different axle, we noticed this, and you can see there's damage to it. In fact, let me clean it off a little bit. Look, it's cut a groove in there, and it's not supposed to do that. This has been installed incorrectly, and I have another video about it. You can watch that for more information. But this is a magnetic sensor. It senses when magnetic things pass it, iron things pass it, and that reads the notches on this hub. These notches right here, and that speed sensor is a part of the automatic traction control system. So the automatic traction control system may not be working on this truck because this sensor is incorrectly installed. Now, the good news is that we've got the hub off, and these first two seals here, these are both for the CTIS, but the one down here on the bottom, that is the seal we're after. That is the hub oil seal, and that needs to be replaced. Okay, so we flipped it over, and now I realized that I was wrong about this. Both of these seals are CTIS seals in here, and I didn't realize that the bearing had stuck on the axle. So normally the bearing would be here, and it might come off when you take the hub off. So now we have to remove this bearing, and then behind this bearing is the... Oh, this bearing looks kind of weird. There's a big gap right there. I wonder if this bearing is damaged a little bit. Well, I'll get it out of there and see. And then behind this bearing is the seal we're looking for, which normally would be sitting in here. So the problem is, if it stays with the axle, then that seal can be really hard to get out. Sometimes it comes with the hub, and sometimes it stays in there. So I've got a feeling that we might have a lot of work ahead of us trying to get that seal out. The seal actually looks deformed too. It's a little bit higher there, and I can see here it's pushed in a little bit. So I'm going to have to check some parts in here before I put this all back together to make sure everything's okay. Alright, so we've been working on this. So the seal and the bearing both got stuck here on the axle. So there's two ways it can work, and the one way is the seal gets stuck in there along with the bearing in there, or it gets stuck here on the hub. And so, yeah, the bearing, when you take the hub off, the bearing would be here, and then the seal is here. That's a lot better way for it to happen. We were unlucky in this case because the seal and the bearing got stuck on the axle. And it's a pain in the rear to try and get the seal out from way back there. There's just no room to work. But we were able to finally get it out. We used these vice grips to grab it, and then just kept prying, and it took us a long time. One thing we did that seemed to help is we sprayed some penetrating oil, like liquid wrench or something, around where the seal contacts the axle, and that helped us pull it out then. I've also had to cut these, but that didn't work very good because when you cut it, then metal filings get all over the place, and then you got to do a really good job of cleaning up everything. I didn't want to do that this time, so yeah, we used this trick of 2 vice grips and then pried on it. So we got the seal out. So it's much better if it stays with the hub, and the seal then just goes in there on the other side of the bearing. This one's no good. We'll throw this one away, and I'll run and grab the new bearing we have, and then we can start putting everything back together. So at this point, we're basically ready to start putting it back together, and we'll start by installing the seal. That's the seal number there. I'll leave it in the description. Comes with some instructions. I don't know. I've never looked at the instructions.
So put some oil in there, get it ready. Oh, again, I got all this stuff at Fleet Pride. I know you don't have to have the seal or the seal installer, but I always do. Oh, and the number of the seal installer on the seal box, it says which one to use, and that's wrong. So it's actually this one. Again, I'll leave all this stuff in the description. I know most people don't use these. They just go ahead and pound it in with a hammer, but boy, I never want to do this oil seal thing again. I'm hoping that if I use all the right tools and everything, that these seals will last as long as I own the truck, maybe for a lot longer than that. I can't tell if these are the original seals. Probably not. The Marines are pretty good at changing the seals all the time. But yeah, let's hope that we can get 2-3 years out of this and I won't have to worry about it. So let me install the seal and everything, and then we'll get ready to put it back together. Okay, a couple things I want to catch up on. First of all, for all the bullshit eaters out there that say, oh, that seal isn't going to last very long. This is a national seal, and this is the one that we use for the oil seal on the very back that we've already put in. And on the internet, I did a lot of research, and most shops out there, mechanic shops that work on the big semis and stuff, they say the national brand is the best. They last the longest. So we're using the best brand we can, and hopefully it'll last a while. Now, we're going to start reassembling soon. But the thing that I wanted to mention is, you know, we're cleaning all these surfaces, getting all the old oil out. We've cleaned a lot of this stuff up here, so we can start reassembling it. But this O-ring is the one that goes around this hub, and there's a little groove there. You don't want to roll it. Okay, there. So yeah, it's stuck in there. We clean the groove and we clean that O-ring to make sure that's all okay. These are the CTIS seals. There's 2 of them. They're held in by this little retaining ring, very similar to the one we saw before. And so if at this time you want to replace the CTIS seals, then this is the time to do it, because number 1, it's all here. And number 2, all you do is remove this ring that's in here, and it sits in there. And they left a little notch there so you can get a screwdriver in there to start it, and then it'll just twist out. The reason I'm thinking about replacing these, and I haven't yet, these are the old ones, is when we took the CTIS apart, right here, when it was on the truck, we took this apart in order to take off the tire, and we found oil in here. And so I think the only place the oil could come from is like backwards. When you're down inflating the tires, you're reducing the pressure in the tires. It's possible that the oil could come through here. If these seals are bad, the oil could leak through, get into this interior part, and then some oil would get pushed up into here. These 2 seals, there's a little bit of room in between, because they sit up here on this shaft, and there's holes here. You can see some holes. There's a little hole there. So the air actually comes into this part of the, or depending upon which way it goes, I guess, the air moves through these 2 holes and into this section here. And then it travels into the tire itself to inflate the tire. So that's how everything works. The air moves through here, comes out these, comes into here, comes out here to either inflate or deflate the tire. So yeah, I wanted to mention that these are the CTIS seals. I haven't found a good source for them yet, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to call, once they're open again, I'll call Fleet Pride and see if they have some of those and I can just replace them. So then off into this area, it's interesting. I didn't notice this before, but as we're cleaning up everything, and everything cleaned up pretty good, it says Spicer Severe Duty right there. So the brakes, I guess, are a little bit special. They might be, instead of asbestos or ceramic or something like that, they might be semi-metallic or something. The ones that the military uses are severe duty. I found you can get these brakes at Fleet Pride, but then they're like regular brakes. I don't think it says severe duty on there, so these might be a little bit different. Another thing, we take advantage of this time when we've got all this taken apart anyway, that when we take the tire off, we clean up the tire. It's easy to keep the outside of the tire clean, but it's so easy now, once the tire's off, to have access to the back of it, when normally, you know, all this stuff's in the way. You can't really get to the back of the tire very easily. So we take the tire off, we take it outside, we clean off the back, and then we put a preservative on there. And maybe I'll leave the name or a link to that preservative too. We don't make any commissions off any of this stuff. But I've tried the silicone stuff before. I guess it works. I don't know. I wasn't super impressed with it, and the tires aren't made out of silicone, so it's kind of tricky to say, oh, we'll put this silicone on here and it'll help the tire last longer. Yeah, I guess it could, but the tire isn't made out of silicone. So the new stuff I'm using is actually, you know, the rubber contains natural oils and stuff because it's a petroleum product. And so this new stuff I'm using, which is made for the aviation industry actually, so it must be really good stuff. It contains those essential oils and tire preservatives and UV blockers. So it makes a lot more sense to me to use that stuff. So that's what we put on the back and on the front. We don't really need the UV blocker on the back, but we want the preservatives and everything because these tires are expensive and they're getting hard to find these days. So anyway, I wanted to talk about all of that stuff, and we're getting ready to start reassembling, so we'll take a little break and then we'll get back to reassembling. Okay, so we replaced the hub oil seal. It's down there. I flipped it over because now we're going to put in one of the CTIS seals. There's two of them, and so I just want to show you that this just drops in here, and then there's a retainer that we'll put in after we get it in. There's a front and a back to this. So the way we have the hub now, the lettering, the numbers on the seal, and there's also kind of a black band on the seal. Those both go up. The numbers up and the black band up. And then you just drop it in there, get it started a little bit so it's in there kind of straight. And then what I had to do, because I didn't have the correct seal press, I made, out of a 2x6, I made a little seal driver. It should be just the right size to fit on there. And then, just like normal, you tap the seal in. Once it's in place, you put in the retainer. All right, we went ahead and pounded in the CTIS seal, and actually some of this came out. I found this when I was working on the truck before, and I thought, man, what are they doing? Why are the Marines putting this stuff in there? But I figured out now that it's from putting the seal in there. When you set the seal in there, a little bit of the edges of the seal come off, and that's what that stuff is. So anyway, we got the seal in there, and we cleaned it up a little bit, and this is that retaining ring. You just start it on one end, and you move it all the way around. There's a lip in there that it fits into, and then the last step is to take this edge and just drop it in there like that. Okay, now that the CTIS seal is in there, both CTIS seals and the hub
oil seals in there. Now the hub's about ready to put on. We'll just lubricate some of this in here and get it ready, because it can be a little difficult to get this actually pushed on there with the new seals. They fit kind of tight. So it's a little heavy for me, so I'm asking my wife to help me out. We're going to take the hub and just put it on the shaft, the spindle. Now, it's important that you try and put it on there as centered as possible so you don't damage the seals. And then it helps sometimes to turn it, although it doesn't seem to be working in this case, because it has a lot farther to go. So, give me a second to see if I can get this pushed back on to where it's supposed to be. Okay, we got the hub onto the spindle, and it didn't want to go on all the way. We were having some problems getting it aligned right and getting past those new seals. So what I did is I put the bearing in there, and then while I was lifting up, because it wants to sag down, lifting up, I was able to push the bearing in there. I don't think it's seated all the way, but that doesn't matter. I'll show you why. So the next step then is we put this on, and then we put on this. Now first I'll show you, this is damaged a lot. We'll zoom in here and you can see there's nicks and cuts, and I mean they were just wailing on this thing, which I didn't want to do. So that's why I built that tool that I showed you earlier. Now there is that bolt that I showed you earlier in here, and you might want to tighten it up or loosen it, but it doesn't really matter, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit, just so it's a little bit tight. When you go to put this on, this protrusion, this pin, has to be toward the outside. And so then you're just going to put this on, and this actually will help push the seals. It'll push the hub on, and it'll make sure that those seals are properly pushed onto the spindle. Okay, there we go. So I tightened it by hand, but if you look in here, you can see there's a long ways to go. And that means those seals back there, they're not in place yet. So that's why I invented this tool. So now the whole idea is I take this and I start turning it rather than banging on it with a chisel or something, which is crazy. The more I turn it, the more it's forcing those seals into the proper place, aligning. This takes a little bit of strength, by the way. Aligning with the spindle. So everything's going to get properly aligned as I tighten this. And I've still got quite a ways to go. So I just keep turning. I was going to make this tool, by the way, so that these two notches here, when they make contact with this brass bushing, then I know I'm done. And I've tightened it all the way that I'm supposed to. But it didn't work out that way. So we just have to keep turning until it gets tight. This is a lot faster too than banging on it with a chisel. Not only do you do a lot of damage when you're banging on it with a chisel, but it takes a long time. Okay, I think that's about as tight as it's going to get. All right, now we get to an important part that I figured out by trial and error. So the first one of these I did, remember how I said there's a bolt on this retaining ring? Well, I went in there and I tightened that bolt because I thought, okay, we're done, the retaining ring's there. No big deal. Do not tighten this bolt, I found out, because this retaining ring needs to move. The reason it needs to move is this pin needs to fit into this hole. And I'll show an insert of that hole. So getting that hole and that pin to line up is really hard because of these teeth, the splines. Okay, see, that fits on there great, right? Now you go to push it back, up, it doesn't go. Guess why? Because that pin isn't in that hole. And boy, I worked for a long time to try and get that all lined up by just moving it from tooth to tooth. But the conclusion that I came to is that's never really going to work because these teeth are so big that you can't get it exactly right. And so what you have to do is you get it as close as possible, and then you have to go in between, go behind there, and move that retaining ring a little bit so that pin moves so that it will line up with that hole. Okay, so we got the hub on. By the way, I noticed there's a little dimple here in this gear, and that might indicate where that hole is on the back of this gear. So that might make it easier to line up. I don't know. Anyway, we got that pin into the hole, and so now this is on all the way. You know it's on all the way because this retaining ring, which is kind of complicated, goes into a slot right here. And if this gear isn't on all the way, then this isn't going to fit in. And you just do this the normal way. You put it at the end, you start in the gear or in that slot, and then you slowly move it around. Sometimes I use a screwdriver to help me out, but I can usually do it just with my hands. I can get that end started. I expand it a little bit and just push it around. Once we get this into place, our next step is we're going to take what I call the hat, but it's the hub with all the gears and stuff in there. We need to clean this up. You can see it's pretty dirty. It's interesting, these trucks, like this one, must not have moved for a while because it's like the oil was all down here. And this part that looks kind of clean probably sat out of the oil for, who knows, 10 years or something. And so that's why it's different. A lot of times you can actually see rust. None of my trucks, I don't think, had rust up here, but some trucks, if they were kept in a moist environment, then this is all rusty up here. And this part down here that was in the oil is okay. So it just depends upon the truck. Yeah, so the next step is we're going to take this and we're going to stick it on here. The way I do it is I use these holes to fit over the lug bolts, and it should just slide on. Of course, these gears in here have to fit over this. Okay, we have to put this on. And that can be a little bit tricky. You need to wiggle it a little bit in order to get it to fit on. So, give us a second to clean this up a little bit, and then we'll put it on. Alright, the next step is put this gear on. In the diagram it shows a couple of other parts, but you can see here this one's turning. So this gear includes all those other parts. So if you're looking at the diagram you might get confused. But don't, the parts are all kind of built into this. So now it's time to put on that gear. So you just put this bolt in, holds that gear on. It looked like there was, on the threads of this bolt, it looked like there was a little bit of Loctite, but I don't know why they would put Loctite on here, the Marines. Sometimes, I don't know if they're fully cognizant of what they're doing. Okay, this bolt can't go anywhere because it sits up against the hub. So
it doesn't matter if there's Loctite on that or not. So now it's time to put the hub on with all the gears, the planetary gears in here. I cleaned it all up. Before we put it on, I already have taken off this O-ring, cleaned it all up, and cleaned out the channel there that the O-ring fits into, and then replaced the O-ring. So that's all ready to go. As I mentioned, it's a little bit hard to get this on because those 4 gears need to kind of wiggle into place. Oh, I forgot to take off this thing, and I've got to find an Allen wrench that fits that. Here's the other one. I like to take those off before I try and put it on there. And you do have to be cognizant of the hole and the CTIS down here. It might be hard for you to see, but just keep in mind that there's a CTIS down here and there's a hole for that CTIS. There's 2 of them actually. It doesn't matter which way it goes. Because one goes on the CTIS and the other one goes off this blocked off CTIS channel. So those 2 holes just line up with those 2 things. So let's take a break for a second and I'll find that Allen wrench. So I didn't film it, but well, I really like these dolly things. I've got a small dolly here, and the hub end was down here. I like these dollies so I can roll things out of the way when I'm working, but also it gets it a few inches off the ground and everything, so it's easier to lift things up and put them on. So yeah, I have quite a few of these little dolly things from Harbor Freight, so they're cheap too. By the way, while I'm thinking about it, these are the plugs for draining and filling the gear oil on the hubs. And they have some aftermarket ones that are really, really good. I'll put an insert in. They're available on eBay. But these original ones don't have a magnet. These aftermarket ones do. These genuine military ones are made out of a soft metal, so it's easy to kind of strip it out in there with a Allen wrench. And so a lot of them are stripped out on the trucks. And so these are cheap, these aftermarket ones. Just order them off of eBay. The guys have been really good. They're cheap, they have a magnet, and they don't strip out like these cheap military ones do. So yeah, I lift it up, put it on there. I hang it on the bolts first, and then you kind of have to jiggle it back and forth. Excuse me. You can move this back and forth because the brake drums obviously aren't on yet, and so the brakes aren't going to stop it. And it hasn't yet connected with that power gear, you know, the drivetrain gear. So this will freely rotate around. And you kind of rotate it and you shake it and everything until it finally, all 4 of those gears mesh with that center gear. Then you're able to push it on. So it'll go on. There's a little bit of resistance because of that O-ring, but it's no big deal. And then I loosened this, I don't know if you want to call it a screw or a bolt. I loosened this already, so then you take it out of that hole, which is for disassembly, and then you put it in here for reassembly. And there's a threaded part back here so that this will thread into that. And then if you're lucky, as you turn in this screw and it makes contact with that threaded part, it will pull the hub end over onto the spindle. And there's 2 of those. There's one here and then 180 degrees down here. There's another one. Yeah, I'll do that off camera, tighten those up and get that all ready to go. We're getting close to the end of this project. The only other thing we have to do is put on the brake drum and fix a couple things. By the way, the shirt I'm wearing today, it's a cat shirt. Now I know we're not working on the engine, but still, For me, it's a nice little added touch to have a cat shirt. My wife bought this for me. I'm getting a little bit dirty today, so I hope she'll forgive me. So yeah, we're getting close to being done. We'll take a break now, do these couple things, and get back to you. Alright, we're getting close to the end of the video. We've only got a couple things left to do. The big thing is put the drum back on. We've cleaned it up. It really looks good now, nice and shiny. And of course, the more we use the brakes, the shinier it'll get. Yeah, so April and I are probably gonna lift that into position. There's nothing really tricky about it except one of the big holes in the brake drum has to go over the CTIS connector, which happens to be over here. After that, then we're going to fill it with gear oil using the plugs. We're going to uncage the brake. We'll put the tire on, and then we'll take the jack out. Lower the jack, take the jack out. We're pretty much done. So give us a second. We'll get this drum into the proper position and everything. We'll go ahead and put that on. The hard thing about lifting this up is two things. Number one, it weighs a little bit, so my wife's going to help me. And the second thing is you can't put your hands inside. You can't put your hands in these holes because it'll get pinched by all this stuff over here. So what we found to do is just put your hand down there, kind of lift it. Okay. Yeah, what's the problem? It's a little bit crooked. Okay. Okay. Now, we've got it basically sitting on there, but it's not lining up with the holes. It needs to turn a little bit because I can see the CTIS isn't lining up exactly right. So, and they made a couple of dents down here, which is nice when you're trying to turn it. Oh yeah, now the CTIS is lined up. There. It's going on properly now, so just keep pushing it. And it should go on. So, give us a second to get this all settled, and we'll be back. I mentioned at one point that we were replacing the CTIS seals because we had oil, and here I took off another tire, and this oil came out of this connection, and this is the CTIS. So, yep, you can see the oil coming out. So yeah, these seals are bad too. The ones inside the hub I'm talking about. These seals and everything here really don't have anything to do with oil getting into the CTIS. So yeah, the CTIS seals that are inside the hub are the ones that are leaking and allowing this oil to get past, and then it gets into this system, which is supposed to contain only water. Or sorry, only supposed to contain air. So, yeah. So this one, we'll have to replace the CTIS seals on this one too. Okay. Yeah, we finally got the brake drum on there. We had to jiggle it a little bit. If the brakes are caged, it goes on pretty easy. It's just heavy. So now I'll take out this plug. Like I mentioned, to make better ones. We're going to put in 80-90 gear oil. This is always kind of a trick because it always wants to come shooting out again. It's cold here in Utah, so we kept this in the house for a while to keep it warmed up so it'll actually flow in there. This is going to be really boring, putting 1.6 quarts of 80-90 gear oil in here. So We'll skip this part. And in fact, we're going to uncage the brakes. That's easy. Doesn't really have much to do with this. So if you don't understand caging and uncaging brakes, you can probably check out another video to see that. And then we're just going to put the tire on, lower the jack, and we'll be done with this axle. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. I hope you found this information helpful, or at least interesting. See you in the next one.